Alright guys, this is my one-shot tutorial video. I'm going to go over the one-shot build and everything involved in doing the rotation, because everyone keeps asking how do I one-shot people so fast? How do they just instantly die in duels? And this is a perfect guide to my rotation and the build that you need to run um, to make it happen. So the first thing is the talents. You need to run pre-med. You need to run Night Stalker. You need to run Deeper Stratagem. This row doesn't matter. That's just defensive. Prey on the Weak, Dark Shadow, and Master of Shadows. And then for PvP talents, Shadowy Duel, Cold Blood, and Dagger in the Dark. Then there's also two macros that I recommend you guys use, which I'll list in this YouTube video and in the Discord. You want to run the Symbols of Death, Shadow Dance, and On-Use Trinket macro. /use 13 will activate the top trinket, which should be your badge. And you also want to macro in Blood Fury if you're Orc. Okay, so that's the first one. The other one I recommend is Shadowstrike Cold Blood. The reason I like using Cold Blood with Shadowstrike rather than the Cheap Shot is Shadowstrike does a huge amount of damage, especially with Dagger in the Dark, whereas Cheap Shot doesn't do any damage, so it stacks a lot of damage in one global, which can catch people really off guard. Like if you're Shadow Striking for 12 to 13k plus a 3k Cold Blood, like that's an instant half their health in one global, which can really catch people off guard. Okay, the other thing to take note on with this rotation that I'm doing is, okay, so poisons, you can do instant poison or wound poison. It doesn't really matter, whichever one. Sometimes instant poison seems better. The other thing you want to take note of is when you're casting Shadow Strike, out of stealth, it does 25% more damage. So you'll see that here in a sec. You'll be able to see my rotation down here, and I'll go over that in slow motion. So Shadow Strike does 25% more damage while in stealth. So let's try to keep that in mind. Let's see if I can slow the video. How do I slow? Let's see. I don't know if I can do slow motion. Should probably figure this out before. Anyways, when you're casting Shadow Strike out of stealth, it does 25% more damage. So let's keep that in mind. So the first thing we're doing is we're building up Dagger in the Dark. You can see a debuff under the enemy, on the enemy, of your Dagger in the Dark stacks. So you want to build that up to 10 before you open for max damage. And you see the Rogue Shadow Strike will deal an additional 70% damage. When that gets up to 10, your next Shadow Strike will do 100% extra damage. And what I like to do is I like to sap whoever I'm killing. I like to sap them. Like let's say I'm in a BG or an arena. I want to sap them in place so that they can't move, and then build up these stacks while they're sapped, right? So they can't get out of it. So once you get that up to 10, 100%, then you're ready to open. Then you're ready to start the rotation, okay? So you don't really do anything until that's at 10. This is ideal though, like you don't have to do this every time. This is just for this is for the max possible damage that you can do. The other thing I forgot to mention too is if you're Night Fae, you want to make sure you're running Naya. Make sure you're running Naya to get the mastery buff when you click Sepsis. Also, if you're Kyrian, make sure you're running the guy that gives you the mastery buff when you do Echoing Reprimand, because it's the same rotation. And if you're running Venthyr, it doesn't matter. Everything's the same rotation. Just swap out the Covenant ability for Sepsis, right? When you see my rotation, if that makes sense. So once you got the Dagger in the Dark stacks built up, you're ready to go. And I'll go over the rotation one by one, okay? So we got our dagger in the dark, and we're getting ready to open. So the first global we're doing is Shadow Blades. Okay, before you even come out of stealth, you're Shadow Blazing. I also have my Orc Racial macroed into that. Doesn't really matter that much. Okay, so you're Shadow Blazing before you open. And then your first global is Cheap Shot. Okay, now Cheap Shot will chunk part of your energy bar. Now the next global is going to be Sepsis. Okay, so let's rewind that just a bit. Your next global is going to be Sepsis. Now you can see your energy is a little more than half, right? So maybe you have 65 energy. So to keep a note, Symbols of Death, Shadow Dance, and the On-Use Trinket, they're all off global cooldown. So this is really important. So Cheap Shot and Sepsis both have a global cooldown. So what this means is between each ability, there's 1 second where you can't use your next ability, right? So because Symbols and Shadow Dance are off global, you want to make sure you are clicking the Shadow Dance Symbols macro immediately after Sepsis, okay? Because it's off global cooldown. So before your next global, you want to make sure you're clicking this macro in between the next global. Okay, and then also Vanish is also off global cooldown. So we're immediately after Sepsis, we click the Shadow Dance macro. And look what that does. It uses Symbols, Shadow Dance, right here, and my badge, all in one button, in between globals. Okay, that's all one button immediately after Sepsis, and you always want to use this after Sepsis because it refills your energy bar to full. Okay, so now you have full energy, right? Because Symbols of Death refills your energy. So you always want to use that macro after you use some abilities that cost energy. Cheap Shot and Sepsis both cost energy. So now I'm refilling to full. So this is the setup. We haven't really done any damage yet. And then this is where the one shot comes in. So right after you use that macro, you're going to vanish. And why are we vanishing here? Because Shadow Strike does 25% more damage coming out of stealth. And we have the Dagger in the Dark stacked up to 10. So it's going to do 125% more damage, right? Because we're doing it with Dagger in the Dark and out of stealth. So we vanish, and then we use Shadow Strike Cold Blood, and now we're at 6 combo points, and then we eviscerate. That is the entire one-shot build. And then let's say they're not dead at that point. You would just keep Shadow Striking and eviscerating as much as you can. Shadow Dance only has 1 second left on it, so maybe you get one more Shadow Strike and another eviscerate or something, and then that's pretty much the whole rotation. And then we'll look at the damage. Shadow Strike did 20.5k damage. Eviscerate did 16.8 plus a 12.1, so Eviscerate did 29k damage. So let's keep in mind this is to a target dummy, so it's not going to be like that all the time. That's pretty much it for the rotation. One more thing, a lot of times I'm killing people in shadowy duels, so just as the rotation goes, you basically cheap shot first, and then shadowy duel. Shadowy duel costs 50 energy, So you're cheap shotting, shadowy dueling, and then just doing the rotation, the same exact rotation that I just showed you. The key is using your symbols of death after you shadowy duel. If you use symbols of death before you shadowy duel, you're gonna be screwed because you're gonna be energy starved because shadowy duel costs so much energy. Alright guys, that's pretty much it. I will list the macros in my in the YouTube below, YouTube description, and in my Discord. So if you have any questions, you can message me in my Discord or when I'm live on Twitch or whatever, and I'll answer them. Okay, thank you.